It's now more dangerous to give birth in the UK today than it was 40 years ago. Serious injuries during childbirth are on the rise, and analysis by the Sky News Data and Forensics team shows spending on midwives is outstripped by spending on compensation payouts.
Well, our next guest is an MP. She's also a mum whose experience formed part of the biggest review of maternity failings in NHS history. She's now been appointed the government's first maternity advisor. Michelle Walsh is with us now. Thank you for being with us. Big job, right? New job.
Yes.
Why is it needed?
Well, it's absolutely needed because, as you know, we have a crisis within our maternity services. You know, what you've just said there, how can that be in this country, in this day and age, that we're even saying those things out loud? Why is childbirth not a priority? And that's why my role is very important.
What exactly is your remit in the new role?
So my remit within the role is to make sure that families' voices are heard within the department. I've been campaigning on this for over 6 years, so I've met over 1,000 families already. I've met lots of organisations. So it's about taking those real voices into the department to understand how real change can actually happen on the front line.
What's going to be different? Because, with respect, we've kind of heard it all before. You know what I mean? Like, we've got changing health secretaries, we've had countless reviews, we've had hundreds of recommendations, and the stats just keep getting worse. So why is it going to be different this time?
Well, this time it has to be different, and people may have heard that before, but absolutely, we now have a national task force. I am now in post, but we have to keep going. We have to look at things like the maternity commissioner. We have to put in place a continuity of care. But what I'm absolutely adamant about it, and there is an army of people out there now that are talking about this, that will not stay quiet, that the inquiries, the Nottingham inquiry and the Baroness Amos inquiry cannot be an inquiry that just stays on the shelf. We have to see action. And I actually personally believe the government has no choice with regard to this, because people are speaking up loudly about it. People are hearing the accounts of women, horrendous accounts. I know that you've had some on this show as well, horrendous accounts. The government has to sit up and listen. They are listening. I am now in post, but boy, we've got a way to go.
Does another change in Health Secretary delay things?
It doesn't delay things, but to say I was frustrated is an understatement. I think to change health secretaries just before two of the biggest inquiries about to be laid before Parliament is not helpful whatsoever. But what I do know is the Secretary of State has hit the ground running. I'm meeting with him all the time. He's met the National Task Force and led that meeting, and he's due to meet the Nottingham families very soon. So he's hit the ground running. I'm there advising him. But was it unhelpful? Yes, I think it was.
Do you think Wes Streeting put self ahead of outcome of patients and mothers?
I haven't had that conversation with Wes Streeting with regards to that. But what I would say, I came into Parliament, one, to support my constituency, but also to improve maternity care. I had an absolutely horrendous experience. But I walked out of the hospital with my son, and I felt lucky. But that is the word that haunts me, because maternity care should never be about luck. I feel lucky the fact that I get to see my son's first birthday. I feel lucky that I go to his parents' evening or see him play football on a Saturday morning. Maternity care should never be about luck. So what I would say is politicians have a real responsibility to get this right, stop playing silly games, to get their head down and make sure action actually happens. And that's what I'm all about. So was it frustrating? Yes, it was frustrating, but I've never had a conversation as to why he did what he did.
You mentioned there your own experience and the fact you felt lucky. And I get that, because honestly, I think that perhaps the hardest thing in this job has been hearing some of the stories that people have sent in, like viewers have sent in, of people who didn't get to bring their baby home. They might have got to hold them, right, for a few moments. They might have got an imprint of their foot, but they won't bring that baby home. What is the number one thing you want to change to try and make sure more mums and dads get to bring their children home with them?
There's two things. The first thing is about continuity of care, real continuity of care. So I had 15 different midwives involved in my care. So I think at the moment you become pregnant, you should have at least one person that stays through the whole of the journey. That's one thing. The other thing is our systems are seriously failing. Our regulators are unfit. for purpose. And so we need an accountability system that allows good midwives to become great midwives, but also when things go wrong, families have a voice, they are listened to, and we as a government step in when we need to. The fact that 10 years, 15 years down the line, we're still seeing issues in trusts of babies dying is absolutely unacceptable.
Can I ask a broad question that clearly this is at the centre of, but we have to get things right, we have to get to the bottom, there has to be accountability. How do you balance that with having too many inquiries?
Well, I think these two inquiries that are happening now, obviously we've got Sussex and Leeds inquiries taking place. I think we balance it by making sure that action is taking place while these inquiries are happening. We've had a lot of recommendations. No doubt Baroness Amos's review is going to have recommendations, but we have to start moving forward now with regards to it. Getting that balance is really, really difficult. But sadly, we're also in a position where families still don't have answers. Until we get those families the answers, then there will have to be those inquiries.
Yeah. Although to Will's point, you just named there two things that we should be doing right now, right, that we could actually make a difference. And I think a lot of people would agree with them. I don't know, obviously be led by you, but you've spoken a bit about your own experience, and this has obviously galvanised you to try and make change. What happened?
So it's quite a long story, so I'll try and make it as quick as possible. I have what is called a concaved womb, a heart-shaped womb, so my son was always going to have a bit of difficulty in moving. He was what you call frank breech, so it was a very early decision that I was going to have a C-section. I could not have the birth any other way. It would have been dangerous to my life and my son's life. Fast forward, 26th of March, I started with contractions. I phoned the maternity department on the advice of my consultant because I was supposed to go straight in, but they needed to make sure which maternity department I was going to go into for a bed. And I was met with the rudest reply and said, you're a first-time mother, you don't know what you're talking about, they're not contractions, just lay down, they're probably Braxton Hicks. I accepted that. 3 phone calls later, they were still saying to me, I was begging the midwife, please can you check my file because I'm supposed to come in. This will put me and my son's life in danger. She said, I don't want you to phone up again with regards to this. That's it. And then about an hour later, my waters broke. I was rushed into the hospital. 5 CCG heart machines later, they couldn't find my son's heartbeat, but that was because the machines weren't working. They eventually found a machine that did work, but his heart was very sporadic. I had interventions with no painkillers. I had consultants that did not say one word to me about what was going on. I was so scared. My son had stopped moving, and the consultant said, obstetrician, we're not going to do your C-section. We don't want to do another C-section this evening. We'll put you on the list for 9 o'clock in the morning. This was now 3 o'clock in the morning where my son's heartbeat was consistently flatlining and I was in a terrible state. I'd not been given any painkillers whatsoever. A midwife came in, and this is where the bit about the look is. A midwife came in, a very experienced midwife that looked at the machine and was horrified at the distress and my son's heartbeat. I could hear the conversation outside. The consultant begrudgingly came back in. The midwife explained to her what she was seeing and said, yeah, you're right, let's go. We need to get her down now. So I was taken down for an emergency C-section, but the one thing as well that really resonates me is that first small nappy. It's the first nappy that your son is going to wear. It's quite, a big thing. And I remember my partner carrying that nappy, but they had no one to push the heart machine at the same time. So there we were, what should have been actually quite a straightforward C-section and birth, with my son's heartbeat flatlining and him carrying that small nappy, and that stays with you. I did have an emergency C-section. Still no one was talking to me and telling me what happened, and the anaesthetist said to me, don't worry, if he doesn't cry when he first comes out, we're expecting him not to cry. Of course, he wasn't put straight into my arms because he had to be fully checked. He did have to have some treatment as well. And then I was out of the hospital within 48 hours because they wanted me out of Nottingham. And then they told me before I left that my son was deaf. And they told me that they didn't know whether he'd have developmental delays or not because he was at some point starved of oxygen. My son isn't deaf. And so far, he's doing really, really well at school. He's very, very sociable and all of those things. But again, I feel like it's luck. I am physically ill every time I go to a parents' evening beforehand. Physically ill because I'm thinking, is this the time that they're going to tell me that actually there is something that's not quite right here with your son? On a birthday should be joyous. I set my alarm early because I go to the bathroom and I sob every morning of my son's birthday because it all comes back, all that trauma. And what I've carried with me is I feel like I'm fairly articulate. I mean, people out there will decide for themselves. I'm a fairly strong woman. But if I can't speak up when you're that vulnerable, who can? Yeah. And how have they treated other women? My son today, you know, he's doing an after-school club today, doing a sports club today. But I've met so many families where when I walk out of that room after speaking to them, I think, gosh, that could have been me. Maternity care should never, ever be about luck. And that is our biggest challenge, a huge, huge challenge. And so that's part of what happened to me.
Thank you. None of that is okay. None of that is okay. And, you know, thank you for advocating. And we're going to go to a break, but incredibly moving. I'll give you a hug. You're all right.
Thank you.
All right.